Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we have a few things to discuss because it's been a busy week for news this week. It's so typical. Some weeks we have like famine and very little to talk about, and not enough for me to personally feel like I could make a video on. And then some weeks you have everything. So I'm going to try and cover everything pretty succinctly. First off, Venom is coming out next week. Look out for a Venom episode next week talking about Venom The Last Dance. I'm saying Venom a lot, which has, of course, Null as the villain, who we've seen a lot more of in footage this week, both his voice and a look at him and All Black, his sword that he uses in the most recent trailer, I think shown at NYCC, New York Comic Con. Don't know why I said it like that. But yeah, so that is obviously coming next week. Keep an eye out for that. I'm not going to talk too much about that now because there's no point getting into the deep dive of Venom when we're doing it next week for the podcast. So that is on the cards for sure. Another one, Daredevil was also shown again, Born Again. The show Born Again, shown again. Oh my gosh, that's a tongue twister. At New York Comic Con as well, and there you saw a lot of footage that was at the event but wasn't shown to us outside of it, and we got a release date, which is the main thing of that, and that being March 4th. Sorry, don't know why I'm saying 24th. I'm pretty sure it's March 4th. It's March anyway, so not too long now to wait until Daredevil returns to our screens. Probably one of the first major projects of next year aside from Captain America. So again, not going to talk too much on that, but it is good to have finally have a release date for that. After we knew it was going to be after Agatha, because that was kind of on the slate initially when we saw it last time, but good to have a date on it now. So yes, that is coming soon. Very excited about that. Want to see more of Daredevil as soon as we can, really, so very excited to see that come to fruition. Now, the main event, I think, this week, one from, again, New York Comic Con, but also one that was kind of shown earlier in the week, which was Dune Prophecy, and then we'll kind of talk about the DC showcase, so to speak, at NYCC. Again, I don't know why I'm saying it like that. It's just in my head, I guess. And essentially, we'll have a look at that and kind of just dissect that too, because there was a lot to kind of gesticulate over there. Is that the right word? I think it is. Anyway, so Dune Prophecy, that is coming out in the next month, November 17th, so just under a month actually, and that is the story of how the Bene Gesserit came to be, so to speak. I keep saying so to speak as well. It's one of those days, guys. I think my brain is just fried. Anyway, so this show is about the Bene Gesserit and how they came to be about 10,000 years before the actual two Dune movies that we've got so far, and like the canon in general for the Dune universe. So this is a really good thing, I think, personally, because you don't have to specifically link anything up to the movies. It's a prequel that will stand very much on its own, aside from like the prophecy side and kind of like making sure they don't kind of make anything that the movie has done incorrect, but I think generally 10,000 years, you have such a good gap from anything. I mean, when Star Wars was 300 years before, that's enough of a gap to affect enough change. Like 10,000 years, you can really play with some stuff. Especially, I'm interested to see, and I forget where this lands within the universe, but I'm interested to see if that means there is more technology involved, if there are like kind of robots involved, or not so much robots, but like computers, because that's something that like is kind of suggested to not exist later on because of the I forget what it's called, the Butlerian Jihad. Is that right? I think that's the term. Look at me, I'm a Dune head. But yeah, so I think you might see a little bit more technology, a little bit more computerization in this one compared to the kind of actual Dune stuff. So I'm hoping they kind of manage to find the right tone, because I think that is one of the big separations of Dune as a franchise from other franchises that are sci-fi-esque, because they really go away from the computerized side and introduce concepts like mentats and of course the Bene Gesserit themselves. So I'm interested to see how that one kind of turns out. I think it could either really do really well and turn into like, I think a lot of people are arguing it's like a Dune version of Game of Thrones, and I can kind of see it, even though I've never actually watched Game of Thrones yet. I know everyone's like, everyone gets like enraged whenever I say that, but like it's a plan. I've got it. I've got like the whole box set somewhere. I've never gotten around to it yet. So yeah, the plan of course with that one seems to be to kind of do a multiple season kind of Game of Thrones-esque thing, and it could work. I don't see why it wouldn't, if they kind of keep to the same level of quality that they did with the actual movies. Now I know I forget how to pronounce his name, but the director of Dune, Denis Villeneuve. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name, but you know who I mean. If they keep to his standard, I know he's not necessarily involved with this. I think he's a producer, but he's not necessarily directing anything. If they keep to his standard, then that's great. As well, we also know that Dune Messiah is kind of on the horizon as well, so they kind of want to keep everything going well, because the Dune franchise is really shot off of late. And like, for example, I mean, like the Dune board game that I have now is like that only came around because of the success of the movie, right? So like there's a lot of like redoing of the book, and there's a game coming out as well next year. So like the franchise is hitting off big, and they need to kind of keep that momentum going. So hopefully the show manages to do that, because I think it will really work for, again, like the game's coming out. People, if you have people ready for that, they're chomping at the bit. You've got a captive audience, right? So I don't have too many other thoughts on it than that, because I think you can't really discuss characters, etc., because they're a whole new set of characters. Yes, they revolve around the same families, the Carinos, the Harkonnens, and the Atreides, etc., and of course, like I said, the Bene Gesserit. But like, it's going to be so separate, So I think it's a wait and see, but quality wise, it looks really good, and I think you could have a really interesting story that is it pays reference to the original material without kind of distorting it in any way. It's kind of the perfect prequel in a way. Oppositely, we have perhaps the biggest thing to come out this week, I'd argue, which is the trailer for Creature Commandos, which essentially, for those who don't know what that is, it is like a Suicide Squad, but sort of not, right? It's like another version, right? And it's basically the idea that Amanda Waller can't use humans anymore for her teams, and so she creates this non-human squad full of like, there's a robot, there's a guy who's like turned into like energy, kind of Dr. Manhattan style, I think. I've got to be honest, the thing with this, and I think this is like both a strength of like James Gunn and what he does, and also like potentially could, depending on how people kind of react to it, be a downfall. I don't know necessarily as much as that, but obviously again he's picked a very veritable list of unknowns character wise for this, and I think that works for him with Guardians, so I don't see why it wouldn't work here. But you never know, sometimes it can flop in a certain direction, especially because this is animation as well. But you have a few known characters. You have Rick Flag Sr., you have Amanda Waller, which is still played by Viola Davis in this, which is great. And then you have Weasel, which Sean Gunn played in the Suicide Squad, the second movie, so to speak. Which, to be fair, I haven't watched that either. I feel like I'm admitting all my flaws today. But yeah, so Creature Commandos is coming out December, I think it was 5th. Yeah, December 5th. So this year, and it looks really good actually. It's quite gory. It reminded me almost instantly of the Suicide Squad Isekai that came out not long ago. And whilst it's obviously going to be different in a lot of ways, and it's not going to another world, I do think it has that same animation, the idea of animation. I think it has that same kind of adult animation style, and I think it looks like it's going to be pretty good. What I find fascinating about it is they're marking it as the beginning of the DCU, which it is in a way, because this is the first project to come out. But that's fascinating to me. I feel like obviously this show was ready and they wanted to release it. I totally get that, but it feels fascinating that this is coming out ahead of the Superman movie, which James Gunn also noted to not have a trailer ready yet, and but they're getting kind of close to that, and also ahead of like the Lantern series that they're kind of doing now, and ahead of the Supergirl movie, which they're starting to film, I believe, early next year in London, in January, which is again exciting. You know, a Supergirl movie is going to be really interesting for a lot of reasons. You know, it's a big step forward. Supergirl kind of doesn't really get to the big screen a lot, from my kind of understanding of it, and it'll be really cool to see that, because I actually did really like, even though it's a CW and I know it's kind of trash in a number of ways, I really did like Melissa. I think she just says her name Benoist, but it's Benoit. I forget how you say it. Names are French names apparently today is a big thing, but either way, I really enjoyed her take on Supergirl, even though it was obviously kind of CWified. So it'll be nice to see Supergirl get some love again. But with all that said, going back to Creature Commandos, it's very interesting that this is going to be the start of the DCU, and even more so because James Gunn has noted that there's like references to the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker in this, so like it's going to like retroactively canonize some of the DCEU, and we'll have to see how that plays out, because I find it hard to understand how you're going to canonize some of that, but not all of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the DCEU was very fractured anyway, so you can definitely pull parts and just say like, oh yeah, these movies weren't canon, but this is. And I think you can kind of go with that for a starting point. I feel like it's very much the same thing as like recasting Rhodey between Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2, but like not. Like if you did it now, I think if you recast Mark Ruffalo between movies now, it would be like weird as hell. If you like, it's same as like not being able to recast like many of the characters that are kind of like on that like tier of like they're that character in those movie set now. Whereas I feel because the DCU is just starting, I feel like you have those like you're allowed those fledgling moments to kind of get your grounding. And I feel I'd rather them go, yeah, this is canon and that's not, than go like I feel like at least then you get some worth out of watching the stuff before. So, you know, and also multiverse, like at this point with comics, you just accept that there's different kind of canonicities, and you accept that a character could die one week and res the next. Yeah, but I do think this show looks really cool, and I think what really does sell it is the cast as well. You have, you know, people like I said, Viola Davis, David Harbour, Alan Tudyk, Anya Chalotra, who was in The Witcher, you know, Frank Grillo, who was Crossbones, you know, and that's just a few. So like this is going to be a really cool cast, a really interesting show. I'm very excited to see where it goes, and yeah, I think this is a fun start for the DCU. I'm happy that they're so confident in this animation that they are putting it as the start of the DCU, because it feels nice to have animation kind of respected in that way. A lot of people say, oh, animation isn't worthwhile, but it is, and it's still a good way of telling adult storytelling. You know, James Gunn said that one of the episodes is one of the saddest things he wrote, episode 4, and he's really excited for us to see it. So, you know, we'll see how it goes, and I'll obviously be discussing it when that comes out. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see what comes out of it, and it's very exciting to see the DCU start to take off. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. Now, as I said, keep an eye out for next week's episode, where we will be discussing Venom, Null, and who knows, because they've been rumoring that this might lead into more for Null with Spider-Man. Now, a lot of people aren't happy with that necessarily, but we'll see how that goes, and it could be interesting depending on how it goes. And if they do a kind of Null symbiote event in the Marvel Universe for the MCU, which I don't think they will, but if they did, I don't think that'd be a bad thing. It was definitely a good comic book run that they did a little while back, and people enjoyed it. So why not? So we'll see what happens there. But in the meantime, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week and a good week to come. And I will see you guys soon for that Venom review. Thank you guys, as always. I'll see you later.